A bus driver has been injured during fresh violence in East Belfast. Sinn Féin says a number of homes in the Nationalist Short Strand came under petrol bomb attack, and community workers on the Loyalist side of the interface say a number of Protestant homes have also been attacked. Within the last 15 minutes, the area has been reported as quiet. Sharon O'Neill has the story.
Police out in force again tonight as fresh trouble breaks out on the streets of East Belfast. This time on the Newtonards Road and again at the interface with the Short Strand. Violence erupted at 7 o'clock tonight after Loyalists once again gathered. Sinn Féin says petrol bombs were thrown from the Loyalist side at homes in the Nationalist Short Strand and that children with special needs had to be evacuated from St Matthew's Parochial Hall.
Vulnerable children with special needs had to be evacuated in a sheer state of panic and fear as a result of what happened here tonight. Now, there was no crowds gathered here, there was no protests at this particular location. It was at the opposite end of the Short Strand, and this is the fallout once again of what this community has had to endure for 6 weeks now, and there's no doubt that they are at their wits' end. It isn't a case that one side is as bad as the other. There are people here who are determined to heighten tensions at the interface in East Belfast.
One Loyalist community worker blamed outside elements for causing the latest violence.
I don't know where they're from, but I can't tell you. The people in this community here are absolutely sick, sore and tired of it. They have had to suffer the brunt of this, and they're now suffering it with young lads coming, and I don't know whether they live in this area or what, because we're all masked up, but you can rest assured the people in this area don't want it. I had 2 or 3 residents come out and were crying and saying, here we go again, how much more of this can we stick?
Within the last hour, there are reports that a number of Protestant homes have also come under attack. Bus services in the east of the city were also suspended, and a driver was injured when Loyalists hijacked 2 buses. All of this comes just hours after senior police and politicians once again appealed for an end to the violence. Sharon O'Neill, UTV Live Tonight, East Belfast.
Tonight's trouble comes after a weekend of violence in East Belfast, described as some of the worst on our streets in a decade. As recriminations continue over what went wrong on Saturday, the Chief Constable has been defending the tactics of his officers. In a few moments, we'll be hearing from Dr John Kyle of the PUP and from Sinn Féin's Alex Maskey. But first, Judith Hill has this report.
Swarming crowds, volatile disorder on the streets of East Belfast as police work to regain control. This is the PSNI's own footage capturing the moments after ugly broad daylight rioting breaks out on Saturday. Loyalists returning from their flags protest at the City Hall clashed with Republicans in the Short Strand, with homes there carrying the marks of the violence. Normally, protesters would return from the city centre along the Queen's Bridge, but the Chief Constable says an agreement had been made because of previous trouble for the protesters to cross the Queen Elizabeth II Bridge. Instead, a large crowd broke ranks, running along Oxford Street and towards the Short Strand interface. And this is where it all went wrong on Saturday. Order unravelling quickly as hundreds of protesters headed onto the Albert Bridge Road. Police, who tried to direct them home via the Newtonards Road, scrambled to regain control.
The crowd that broke away, 300 or 400 strong, you'll see the footage. Again, it comes back to that point. Unless you work with organisers, unless you work with the people who are responsible, that's exactly what happens here. And, we will revise our tactics. I'm not claiming we get everything perfect, but that situation was brought under control within minutes. It was contained. The number of houses damaged was unfortunate, but it could have been a lot worse if the police hadn't acted very swiftly to deal with that.
On Saturday, it was violence by day and by night as police came under heavy attack from the Loyalist crowd who just wouldn't go home. Another car burned, missiles hurled, more police officers injured.
This narrative that's beginning to creep out within the media in particular, that one side is as bad as the other, one side has brought it on itself, one side came out and attracted this, is false. There are people here who are usurping the law in this city, preventing ordinary people from going about their business, attacking homes. That's what's responsible for this.
I think the mood of the protesters is they will continue to protest. They see it as a legitimate right, and I think as long as protests are peaceful, I have no difficulty, and the vast majority of people want them to stay peaceful. Sadly, there seems a rump of young lads who are intent on taking on the police, and people don't want the violence. The local people don't want it, the paramilitaries don't want it, the politicians don't want it, and we have to find a way to stop that violence in the streets of East Belfast.
It's over 40 days since Belfast City Council voted to change their policy on the flying of the Union flag at the City Hall. Protest after protest has ensued. Disruption and violence have only accompanied some of the protests, but 100 police officers have been injured. And with no unionist voice able to quell the trouble as yet, questions continue to be asked over who actually has influence over loyalism. Even on Saturday, divisions were very clearly on display.
We are all loyalists, we're all unionists, we're all the guard. What we want is a better way forward. My point is...
Unionist leaders have been accused by some of a hands-off approach, but their politicians argue working-class communities feel the peace process has left them behind.
After 40 years of murder and mayhem, I think the notion that peace could be established, that everyone could have a new dawn, and what did we get really other than the continuation of the previous path that some were taking that involved violence, no longer involving violence, but continually chipping away at people's sense of themselves and where they belong, and all of that has had a cumulative effect.
But away from all the obvious street battles, there are other strong views on the streets.
I think frustration is the wrong word. We're disappointed, I think, is the biggest thing, and it's annoying. It's happening when people, are not allowed to go about their ordinary work because of roadblocks. That's sad.
Well, I don't come into town too often, but it is an awful nuisance for people that wants to come into town, really.
Sunday saw another peace gathering at the City Hall, over 1,000 people joining together to raise their voices for a different future for this place. Some within the silent majority not so keen to maintain their silence.
Well, their voice is, I do believe, it's a creative and imaginative voice. It's not one of doom and gloom, and it's not anti-this or anti-that. It's people saying, we live here, we've invested a lot in this place, we've built livelihoods and we've built connections, and we've built a sense of community across the city and across the city's boundaries and divisions. And somehow we are going to take that forwards.
They are, of course, competing with some of the worst street violence seen here in a decade. But the hope of the majority must be that somehow these voices will win out. Judith Hill, UTV Live Tonight.
And within the last few minutes, the police have confirmed they came under attack from crowds throwing petrol bombs and stones as they responded to reports of petrol bombs being thrown from Pitt Park towards St Matthew's Church in Bryson Street. Water cannon was used due to the extent of the disorder. There was an exchange of stones and other missiles between two factions until police restored order. A 17-year-old youth has been arrested. One officer is reported to have been injured, and that is the latest statement that we have from the police tonight. Well, in the studio with me, Dr. John Kyle from the PUP and the Sinn Féin MLA, Alex Maskey. John Kyle, any pleas for violence to end has fallen on deaf ears. People are just not listening.
Well, Paul, certainly the people of East Belfast do not want violence. They recognise that violence is destroying their community, it's destroying community relations.
But that's not what we've seen tonight.
Well, we've seen, as the Reverend Mervyn Gibson said, a rump of young people determined on violence. And that has been rejected by the people of East Belfast.
How are you going to stop this?
Well, clearly there needs to be urgent action taken.
And what is that urgent action?
Well, first of all, when there's rioting, the police need to deal with the rioting. But more particularly, we need to then get people off the streets, and we do that by engaging with the protesters and offering alternatives to road blockages. We need to offer valid and effective alternatives.
They're not listening to the community leaders who are on the streets.
Well, the question is, have the politicians actively engaged with the protesters?
Have you?
Yes, I have, and the PUP has asked for an urgent meeting with the Ulster People's Forum. But there needs to be a proactive approach by the politicians politicians to deal with the grievances and anger of the protesters.
Alex Maskey, there are reports of homes under attack tonight in the Short Strand. What have you been hearing?
Well, I spoke to my colleagues and some residents in the Short Strand tonight again, and a number of homes were attacked by petrol bomb, and people were actually literally putting out fires at their home. Now, you know, Paul, I sat here this time last week and I said that we were facing a downward spiral, that someone was going to be seriously hurt. We could have been looking at a family burned to death tonight in the Short Strand, and I'm sick to death listening to weak and meaningless words from unionist politicians who are afraid to stand up to those people from within their own community, who are hell-bent on bringing us back to conflict, who are opposed to the peace process, who are opposed to the changes that are required in the society. And I think that these politicians, John, I have to say, and we've worked very well with John in the City Hall and within the East Belfast community, but at this point in time they are basically totally irrelevant in this situation, unless they stand up.
You're feeling you're not standing up to these people, John Kyle?
Well, I think that's a misperception, Paul. I think we're making it very clear what our position is in terms of violence. There is no place for violence in Belfast or in East Belfast. Well, people are listening to us, but clearly there are a rump of people who are intent on violence, and they need to be dealt with, and they need to be tackled. However, the underlying issues, which are mammoth and crucial and pressing, need to be actively addressed by politicians. We can all try and blame one another. We can all say, well, who threw the first stone, who caused this? But the fact of the matter is that we need to get beyond the violence to deal with the underlying issues.
But this is in danger of becoming a self-perpetuating cycle of violence.
It's actually quite disgraceful, because it is a downward spiral of violence, and we've said that, and unfortunately our predictions are becoming true. This is becoming very, very serious. There's a community there in the Short Strand, and I don't want to see any person attacked, any police officer having a petrol bomb fired at them, and certainly no homeowner or their family with the petrol bomb thrown at them, or anybody throwing stones in the area. What I want to see is total calm brought to this area. But let us be very clear, this is going on a very dangerous turn, and people with influence in that community need to stand up to the wreckers.
Equally, there are elements on both sides. This violence is feeding off each other.
There is an ongoing assault on the, I have to say, and I'm going to state this very clearly, there is an ongoing assault now ongoing against the Short Strand community.
But we have also heard tonight of evidence of stones and petrol bombs being thrown the other way.
We haven't heard people throwing petrol bombs from the Short Strand. What we're hearing tonight are people from the Short Strand throwing stones back, and if they are, they're defending their homes. And if I lived in the Short Strand, I'd be throwing the stones along with those people, because it is disgraceful what those families are having to put up with. And people like John have a lot more responsibility to tackle this.
John is here. He's taking it. He's taking it on the chin. He's taking it on the chin.
But they need to go and deal with their own community problems.
But John Kyle, does the answer to this not lie within the unionist loyalist community?
Well, certainly within the Unionist Loyalist community there's a major responsibility, but we cannot do it alone. It requires the Nationalists and the Republicans to help us in this. If we're to have a shared society, if we're to live together peacefully, we cannot do this on our own. There's provocation, there are all sorts of grievances and angers, there's inequality. These need to be dealt with, and we can only deal with them together. Alex has to help us. We have to work with him if we're to achieve that.
John Kyle and Alex Maskey, thank you both very much.